Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Zero Project Conference 2026. You are connected with the building in Vienna, and we are listening to the fireside chat, which comes under the title Hidden Barriers, the Accessibility Gap in School Policy Documents. My name is Evert-Jan Hogewerf. I'm the Secretary General of the Association for the Advancement of Assistive Technology in Europe. And I'm here to talk about the topic with my guest, Anne Marcus Quinn. Thank you, Anne, all the way from the University of Limerick. Fantastic that you could make it here, and you're a real expert on the topic. So we're eager to listen to you. And my first question relates to the title of the session, Hidden Barriers. What are actually those hidden barriers in school policy documents, and why is this a problem?
Thank you very much, Evert. Often when we talk about digital inclusion in post-primary schools, we're talking about devices and connectivity, and we often forget about the importance of policies, practice, training, and accountability. So hidden barriers is really about those systems that are in place. I undertook research last year with Professor Selina McCoy in the Economic and Social Research Institute in Ireland, and we looked at a number of accessible use policy documents in larger schools across the country, and we found that many of these documents were not accessible, and it wasn't limited to those policy documents. We also found that across other documents that were used to communicate within the school community. So I suppose when we're talking about hidden barriers, we're talking about the things that people may not think about when they're putting together a document. So out of the need to be helpful, they might create a very good digitally inclusive document. They might print it off and have someone from the school executive sign that document. Then the document might be scanned, rendering all of the accessibility features completely useless, and then that inaccessible PDF is made available to the school community. So it's really about raising awareness when a digital document is going to be disseminated with the community, that we think about who's going to use it.
Yeah, I can imagine it's not something which only affects people with disabilities who might have difficulties in accessing in digital accessibility documents. But I think your area of interest is also broader, also looking into other groups that are maybe excluded, or?
We often don't think about people who aren't fully sighted, but as census data from Ireland Census 2022 revealed, we have a growing number in a ever widening and more diverse school community who report issues with sight, and their parent group as well. Of course, it's an ageing society, so we need to think about what we can do to make those documents more accessible for everybody. And simple things like the colour contrast, the alternative text that we include, thinking about how we can make everything just easier to consume if it's going to be made available online. The days of a letter coming home in a school bag have passed, and then we would have moved on to communicating with parents and our school community through email. And a lot of the time that was quite accessible because you could switch on an audio feature. But when we move to school-based apps or websites, there is the inclination to just upload a PDF and not think about how that has been designed.
How that has been designed, yeah, okay. Now I can imagine that there's a lot of discussion about accessibility and a lot of attention. There's a lot of legislation, so it's not really an entirely new topic at the moment. Isn't that enough for schools to sort of start to make their information and their communication towards the students and their families more accessible? You think more should be done?
Absolutely, there is legislation there, but that doesn't often automatically translate into practice. So I think the example that I gave earlier is one of the most common ones that you see, where someone may have worked very hard putting together an accessible document in Word format. So they've thought about things like tables They've thought about intuitive, meaningful titles. They've really built in good navigation throughout that document, colour contrast, alternative text, how they're presenting tables and so on, even the typeface that they're using. And then this wonderful document is printed off and is signed and is exported as a PDF, but not in a way that is easily consumed. So I think just even raising that early awareness of baking in accessibility from the very beginning is really important, and having all members of the school community get behind that. So you're not just talking about those people preparing the document, but it's the people who have responsibility to upload it to the school system, whatever that is, whether it's a website or a school app.
I can imagine that that is a major issue, how to make sure that it's not just a small group of people that maybe have some kind of a sensitivity for the topic or are expert on it, but that it's really a commitment of an entire school. Did you came across, or do you have any ideas about what a school could do better to make sure that this is not only, let's say, a temporary wave of attention or an incidental intervention to make something, the website more accessible, but that it's really embedded in the school policy? So what would you recommend the school, how to address this?
There's some really good points there. I think when a school receives a circular from the Department of Education and Youth about having to craft a new school policy, they're very careful about that document. So the first iteration of a document is often the most careful. It's when it needs to be updated that a lot of the time, as I said, it gets printed off, it gets signed, it gets re-uploaded, and those kind of things are forgotten. There are a lot of really good supports there for schools that are often overlooked, and schools are very, very busy places as well. So the more people that could perhaps get involved in the usability testing of documents, the better. And there's often groups within a school community that have a little bit more time. For example, in Ireland, we have a transition year programme, and you have many students within that programme who would be interested and have the capacity to carry out that kind of testing, using the supports that are available. So they're not experts in usability testing, but there are online wizards and supports such as those provided by WebWise, which is funded by the government in part. So they could use those resources and they could check how their document performs against an exemplar document. And then you'd have a real sense of ownership about the document as well. And you could see, where are the problems for people. And I think if you've got a group to usability test it within a school community as well, you grow their sense of empathy. They can really, once they see and identify people in their circle who can't access the information, they really want people to be able to access that information. So there's a community want to make it better.
An interesting question that comes to my mind relates to artificial intelligence. I suppose you came across maybe schools that try to attempt to simplify or to make their communication more accessible by using AI tools. How do you see that? Is that an opportunity, or are there risks or pitfalls?
Absolutely, there are opportunities with using AI tools, and there are pitfalls. I think some of the opportunities are that we can take a scanned image, and we can, using optical character recognition or text recognition, we can get, without us having to provide that transcription, we can get that rendered very, very quickly. But we need to be really careful that we haven't got this false sense of confidence about the quality or the accuracy of that translation. So we still need a human in the loop to make sure that that text is accurate. But there is definitely room there for some tools to help to do the heavy lifting to make documentation more accessible. But I think we also need to be careful about what school documents we might run through an external platform, because some of them may contain sensitive information.
It's really a very interesting research that you're doing. What are your, I think you identified very clearly now what are the issues, what are the topics, what are the problems. What are your next steps? What would you like to reach as a next outcome of your research?
I think what I would like to really see is that when people see from looking across the board at all school documentation, the issues that are there, that they would see it as a checklist, that they need to go and look through all policy documents, and to move away from being very reactive when a school is asked to create a new policy document, that they would take that as an opportunity to do an audit on the website, to look at existing documentation and to look at the uniformity across that documentation. Because often a school, again, they're under immense pressure and they don't have a lot of expertise maybe in the area, but they may be able to use that opportunity to look at earlier policy documents and go back and address those issues. Again, doing usability testing within the school community. In that research with Professor McCoy, where we looked at acceptable use policies, we found that some of the documentation went back to a period where schools were using floppy disks. So these were mentioned in the policy document. We also had mention of CD-ROMs, but the school has moved on. They're not using that technology anymore. So in a way, it compromises the content of a document where they have reference to that older, out-of-date, redundant technology. So I think that if they are preparing a new policy document, that they look across the whole suite and see how they can update all of them. It's a big job, but I think if they have the will within the community, they, there's a good outcome.
Yeah, that would be a perfect outcome. One of the most interesting things I think a school could do is to involve the large school community in the transition. So transition towards a more, let's say, respectful and way of communication with all the different stakeholders. The idea itself that also the students themselves, for example, could be co-designers of alternative communication. And maybe sort of critically looking at how the school is doing is actually quite interesting. Do you think that there is space for, let's say, more action research together with schools? Have you noticed, are there schools that actually willing to make it really a process which is driven from the bottom up and not so much top down?
Again, I think it really is a matter of schools being under immense pressure and not having the time to engage in that type of activity. But if they could identify some space within the curriculum and certainly within the transition year, that would be a natural home for that activity, they could do that. When you were talking about using AI to address those gaps in documents, what you often find is that where a document has been created without student involvement, it's missing the student voice. And we've all seen documents that have been created using AI. They don't sound very human. So certainly it would really lift the experience if students could be involved, because it would sound like a document that had relevance to them and their lives. So they would have probably a little bit more respect for the policy document as well.
Okay. Well, thank you, Anne. Will we see you in Dublin at the National Disability Authority and University of Limerick conference in November on universal design?
Thank you, Evert, for mentioning the conference. It's on in Galway in early November, and yes, I will be there. I've been asked to be part of the scientific committee. I'm really looking forward to meeting everyone involved.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you very much, Anne, for being here and for discuss this with us. Thank you for attending this session, and over to the organization. Thank you.
Thanks, Evert.